Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Side Scroll Basics Part 4. I'm going to talk about the kill zone a little bit and how we can use that to destroy a character and then bring them back at a spawn point. So let's get started here. First off, let's create ourselves a 3D cube and we will name this as our kill zone, and I'm going to position it in the scene somewhere below my test platform and scale it big enough that if I jump off the edge, I'm going to land on it. And the other thing I'm going to do is just make it not quite so white, so it's a little bit easier to look at. And since I know that I need to use it as a trigger, I'm going to make sure that the box is trigger is checked in the box collider. Alright, so that's basically all I really need to do to set this thing up, except for we need some programming. So let's add an FSM to it. We're going to name this FSM as well. Call this the kill zone FSM. And state 1 here, basically just call this waiting. It's just hanging out, waiting for something to happen. And since we're going to do a trigger action, we're going to use this trigger event. It's going to be waiting until something triggers it. And I want to say when something enters it as opposed to stays or exits. And since I'm talking about the player, my player is tagged as player. So I'm going to say on trigger enter something tagged player, send an event, which I don't have, so let me make one real quick, and I'll say kill the player. And I'm also going to store the player here too. We'll call this the dead player, and that'll make it easier here in a second to destroy it. So I'm going to store it. I'm going to have the event come to the second state. We're going to name this to killing the player, and to make sure that it doesn't only do this once, we'll add a finish state and have it come back. So now we're on trigger enter with something called player, send the event kill player, and store our player into this variable called dead player. Then in our killing player, we're going to add an action of destroy object. And I also know that I'm going to need to create a new one, so I might as well add it while I'm here. And we'll do that at the end. Okay, and you could have another state, you could have a wait and an animation and all sorts of things in here. This is just the quick and dirty. The object that I want to destroy is what I saved into dead player. And as far as the object that I want to create, well, we gotta do a little work here, because right now I've only got just this one player, and I'm going to save it into this and then destroy it, and it won't exist. We have nothing left to duplicate or copy. So we need to make a prefab out of this guy. So let's go to the prefabs folder here and make ourselves a new prefab. I'll call this the player prefab. So now we have that guy, and I can say, what do I want to create? I want to create this beautiful prefab. Then I need a spawn point, and the spawn point could be a game empty. It could be a physical vector position in space. It can be a variable vector that we're just setting via checkpoint or something along those lines. For the demo purposes here, I'm just going to use a game empty and call it player spawn point, so you have something to see on screen. And I'm going to set it to the exact same place in space that the center of the character is right now. And so now back in my kill zone, I can say that this player spawn point is where we want our new player prefab to spawn. And let's go ahead and test this. We're going to have a couple problems, but I already know that they're going to happen, so let's look and see what happens. First off, everything appears to be just fine until I fall into the pit. And then you'll notice that what happens is my camera no longer follows my player, and I can keep respawning, so that part's working, but my camera's broken. And the reason is, originally when we set up our camera move, we just had it following the player, not this new player prefab. And what's going to happen is every single time, even if I drag the prefab in here, the next time I die, the camera is going to lose connection with it. So what we're going to do to fix that problem is we're going to add an action to, or excuse me, we're going to add a new FSM to our player prefab. It's going to initialize itself. So we'll call this FSM the player initializer. And this first state we'll call initializing. And what we want it to do is we want it to declare itself as a global object. So every single time a new one gets created, it's going to initialize itself, raise its hand and say, hey, I am the player, and that way everything in the scene that's looking for that variable automatically will retrack. So let's do the action of set game object. And the variable we want to set, we don't have yet, so let's say new global variable, and I'm going to call this the player global. And what do I want to set it to? I want to set it to the prefab that we're going to use. Don't need it to happen every frame, just once whenever a new one gets spawned, and we should be good. And then let's set our main camera. Instead of following this object, let's have it follow the player global variable. And then let's retest real quick. Okay, so it starts out, it's working fine, and if I die, oh, respawns, and the camera follows every time. So it's definitely working. Excellent. And that's the gist of it. Hope that was helpful. Talk to you guys soon.